What's going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the Stoic Barefoot Trainer. So 3 things to like with this shoe is number 1, it's a really good barefoot shoe for blending cross training and lifting. So this model I think is going to have a much more lifting focused bias to it, but it also works exceptionally well for cross training, which is actually something that surprised me. Unlike models like the Advances Apex Power, which is a little bit more lifting niche and focus, where it's not that great for cross training, this shoe I think can transcend both verticals really well. With this model, it is a super grippy rubber outsole for lifting and strength and power work, but then it also has enough upper security and a nice articulative feel for plyometrics, jumping, hit, etc. So if you need that barefoot shoe for lifting and cross training, but you do have a slight lifting bias to your needs, the Stoic Barefoot Trainer can be a great option for that. The second pro that I have with this shoe is the rubber outsole, its amount of grip, and just how thin it is. So this model has a 4mm thick sole. So you have 2mm tread, 2mm base. You also have this removable ortholite insole, so you can take this out and get super close to the ground. But then you have this Stoic tread patterning, and it does a really good job at promoting overall grip. I also like how this rubber wraps on the lateral side, helps add additional support here on the lateral toe box. So if you're doing any form of sumo pulling, any form of explosive lateral work, I have found this to help contribute to the shoe's grip. And on rubber gym floors, wooden platforms, turf, etc., this rubber has done an exceptionally good job. The third pro that I have with this shoe is the upper construction around the boot and just how it fits. So this model has a very sock-like fit. However, it's not so limiting or so low volume that you can't really get your foot in if you have a higher instep or a thicker foot. I really appreciate this neoprene-esque construction up here on the collar. It gives you a nice range of wiggle room of being able to pull this shoe on and make it comfortable. And it does a good job, I think, at giving you enough space without feeling super limiting. With the laces, in addition to this booty style construction, it just gives this shoe a nice overall fit regarding its security without feeling super limiting, but then also kind of giving you that sock-like fit and feel, which I know for me is a nice feature of most barefoot shoes. I also appreciate that this has a nice amount of stretch to it, because some barefoot shoes that use a more booty style construction without that separate tongue, they can be pretty tough to get on. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the Stoic Barefoot Trainer. So 2 cons that I have with the Stoic Barefoot Trainer is number 1, you can have a little bit of a creasing on the medial side of each forefoot of this shoe. So with this mesh upper, it's a little bit thicker with its material here around the toe box. And so this gives it a slightly chunkier feel. And what I've noticed is that on certain movements, especially things like box jumps or sled pushes where I'm really digging into that forefoot, you can kind of have this material press into the top of the foot. Now this does subside over time. However, it's worth noting because similarly to like the Primus Light Knit from Vivo Barefoot, which has a creasing on the lateral side, this is going to give you that same kind of pressure on the top of the foot because the material starts to press in when you are starting to train. Honestly, I feel like in the next iteration of the shoe, if this material was decreased in the sense of its thickness, because it does have a little bit of like padding in there to protect your foot and give you security, I think that would almost mitigate this issue. Or if they reworked where this medial lace on the bottom eyelet here meets this forefoot, that could also mitigate it. So do note, you might have a little bit of pressure in this shoe. I think that will subside for most folks. However, if you are very prone to experiencing that with barefoot shoes, definitely tread lightly with this model, because I don't think you're gonna be able to get around it in this shoe. The second con that I have with this model is it's not the most breathable barefoot shoe on the market. So the mesh upper, I think, breathes okay through the forefoot. However, with this synthetic overlay and more leather focused overlay around the toe box, midfoot, and then back here in the heel, it does decrease this shoe's breathability. It gives the upper a slightly heavier fit, which I think is good for security, but it does take away from being able to rock this shoe in hotter settings and not necessarily notice it running a little bit warm. I have worn the shoe with and without socks, and in both settings, I have noticed it got a little bit warm, so definitely food for thought there. This might not be the best barefoot shoe to wear without socks, because with that lack of breathability, I don't want you to dump a bunch of sweat into the shoe because of lack of breathability, and then you have a shoe that starts to stink way too fast. So this may be one of those barefoot shoes that you can only rock with socks, and that's based on my interpretations of wearing the shoe with and without socks. Overall, the shoe has performed exceptionally well. I think there are little tweaks that they can make in the next iteration that'll make it even better, but for a first pass, this model has been exceptional. So now let's talk about the performance of the Stoic Barefoot Trainer. Shoe lovers, if you love barefoot shoes, training shoes, and weightlifting shoes, and you want an email newsletter that is similar to the Morning Brew but with a shoe spin, sign up for the That Fit Friend newsletter down below. I will never spam you, and I send those out bi-weekly, so you will always have the latest shoe news in your inbox. To discuss the performance of the Stoic Barefoot Trainer, I'll discuss how this shoe does for lifting, cross training, short runs, and daily wear. Because this is a lifting focused shoe, I wanted to give this review a slightly different focus. So I tried to push them into more athletic style training, which is how I typically prefer to train. So when it comes to lifting, I have really enjoyed this shoe. If you're somebody that wants a barefoot shoe for powerlifting, static strength work, some hypertrophy work, this model is an awesome bet. You have a nice rubber outsole with a ton of tread, wraps around the medial lateral side. You also get this additional lateral support on the forefoot here. And so I don't think you're gonna have spillover issues, and I don't think you're gonna have grip issues. So in the context of being grippy for strength work, this model works exceptionally well. You also have that removable insole so you can get closer to the ground. I have taken this out for my deadlift sessions and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I also do enjoy this slightly heavier bootie construction. Sometimes I like a little bit more feel around my ankle when training, especially for my heavier sets. And so this shoe has kind of fit that void really well. It almost feels like what I would describe as like a heavier Vans, not obviously the same weight as a Vans, but in the spectrum of barefoot shoes, in the context of having a little bit more beef around the upper, etc., locking that foot down versus being super lightweight and wispy, this shoe would definitely be on the heavier end of that spectrum. So if you're somebody who typically likes to train in Vans, etc., because they are a little bit more built out, you might really like that about the shoe when it comes to lifting. In the context of cross training, the shoe has also done a good job, and honestly, it's performed way better than I thought it would. I figured this would be a shoe designed specifically for lifting. It wouldn't really feel that great for cross training, but for the most part, this shoe has performed exceptionally well. I've done a lot of single leg work, plyos, jump rope, and also some CrossFit style WODs in this model, and it has held its own. I would almost compare it most to like the Innovate Bare XF. That model works good for lifting, but it also works exceptionally well for cross training. Whereas this shoe has a bit more of a lifting focus, the Bare XF has a bit more of a cross training focus, but they both work really well in those verticals. So if you do want to cross train in this shoe, I think you should be fine doing so. Again, my only gripe with this model in that cross training setting is that you can have a little bit of material press here on the medial side of your toe box. I don't think that's going to be an issue, once again, though, that bothers everybody. However, if you're like myself and you do typically have longer toes and find that to be an issue in some of your barefoot shoes, definitely food for thought there. In the context of the break-in of this model, you might need to give it a little bit more time to start to feel really comfortable. Stoic, I think if you guys brought down the padding in the forefoot of the shoe, it might actually be better and mitigate that issue entirely. So I'm stoked to see how they make the change in the next iteration. When it comes to short runs, you can run in this shoe. Would I do it often? No. And that's because of the breathability of this shoe. If I'm going to run in a barefoot shoe, I'm going to go for something more breathable, a little bit more specific. And typically when I reach for barefoot shoes for running, I like shoes with separate tongues because I don't want to stretch out this upper. I want this to stay nice and secure for lifting and cross training focuses. But all that said, if you want to tack on some short interval runs or even a mile run pre or post workout in this shoe and you just want that barefoot shoe for doing a little bit of everything, it can work. When it comes to daily wear, I actually really enjoy this model. And now I know it's a lifting focused barefoot shoe, but I kind of dig the appearance. We have very minimalist branding on this shoe. Like we only really have branding up here on the loop, on the tongue, and then back here on the heel. And with the colorways, they are pretty simple. Maybe I'm just a sucker for black and gum colorways, but this shoe I find is easy to rock out and about with different outfits. I have worn these with pants, with shorts, and they look pretty good. And I like how the boot comes up a little bit more. It doesn't look so barefoot shoe-esque in the sense of being lower with the ankle and then super wide through the forefoot. I also think that it should have plenty of width for most folks' foot anatomy. So in the context of being comfortable all day, this model will do a good job. My only thing to mention there for daily wear is, again, the breathability isn't the best. So if you're rocking them on super hot days, like I am in Washington right now and it's 104 degrees outside, this would not be my first pick for wearing all day out and about. It is gonna lack the breathability that I want out of a barefoot shoe. And if I am gonna wear this shoe, I'm gonna make sure I wear a sock to help mitigate some of that sweat dumping into the shoe, or at least directly into the upper and internal construction of this shoe. Overall though, this shoe has done an exceptional job. For lifting, I would give this shoe an 8.5, 9 out of 10. For cross training, I would give it a solid 8 out of 10, knowing that it's not necessarily a shoe just designed for that. For short runs, I would give this shoe a 6.5 out of 10. Again, you can use them. They're not really gonna be the best for that though. And then for daily wear, I would give this shoe a strong 7.5 out of 10, knowing that it's not really built for that either, but they work exceptionally well in that category. When it comes to the price of the Stoic Barefoot Trainer, you can expect to pay around $110. This puts it in the same ballpark as models like the Tolos Archetype 2.0, and honestly, this shoe and the Tolos model are quickly becoming two of my favorite barefoot shoes to train in. In fact, if I had to pick my 4 top models at the moment in the sense of budget-friendly prices and they also work really well, I would pick the Tolos Archetype 2.0, the Stoic Barefoot Trainer, the Innovate Bare XF, which has a price of $120, and then also models like the Prio Neo or the Prio, which hover around $90 or $100. those are all really solid, well-rounded barefoot shoes for training. They're gonna cost you around $120 or less. All right, now who should buy the Stoic Barefoot Trainer? So if you are an individual looking for a barefoot shoe primarily for lifting with some cross training sprinkled in, this model can be a really good bet. The second context where I think this shoe makes a lot of sense is for my folks who like a little bit more material around the ankle and like a more structured upper with their barefoot shoes. This can be a really good option to look into. Again, this boot is a little bit heavier than other barefoot shoes on the market, and this upper is gonna have good security with its weight. The third context where I think this shoe makes a lot of sense is if you are somebody who needs a barefoot shoe for training, but you also live in a colder climate and you want a model to wear out and about for all day wear, I think that's where this shoe can also make sense. It's not necessarily designed for that once again, but with its heavier upper construction, I see it as being a really good cold climate friendly shoe for the person that wants that singular model for training and whatnot. Not every barefoot shoe works in colder climates. For example, models like the Primus Light, I would not wear on winter days because there's way too much breathability and my feet get cold, but this model can be a great alternative for that. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? Number one, if you're somebody that wants a barefoot shoe for CrossFit running and a little bit more versatile training, you might want to pass on this shoe and look for something that's a little bit more optimized for that. This model can work, but I think the heavier upper will start to hinder its performance long term for your needs. The second context is if you're somebody who's really big on breathability and you don't want a ton of upper weight or just a higher boot, that would definitely be something to consider with this shoe. I think this boot is going to be an acquired taste. I personally like it. I like a little bit more material around my ankle at times, but it could be something that I could see being problematic for some lifters and athletes. When it comes to the sizing and fit in the Stoic Barefoot Trainer, I think most lifters should be safe going true to size in this model. So this model size is unisex, but I don't think it's going to be an issue for most. So for my guys, for example, who have exceptionally wider feet, do not fret because it's unisex. And for my women who have narrower feet, this model should still work for you. So I have an E to double E width foot and a normal arch. This shoe fits true, and this is a size 10 US or converted to a size 10 US for me. And I have plenty of room in the sense of width and length of this model. Now I will say if you do have exceptionally wide feet, so let's say 4E with feet, you might find it a little bit snug just because this rubber outsole wrap can feel a little bit more aggressive, but I do think that should break in. And then just to add a quick note there, I think once this material in the forefoot is brought down in the sense of padding too, I think that will also give this shoe a more spacious fit. But all that said, and to wrap that up, I think true to size will be the safe call for most lifters. So when it comes to the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the Stoic Barefoot Trainer, for my size 10 model, we have a weight of 9 ounces. The heel to toe drop of this shoe sits at 0 millimeters, and this model does have a thin foam removable insole, so you have this thin foam ortholite insole, and the internal construction is finished in this shoe. All right, so now let's break down the construction of the Stoic Barefoot Trainer. So looking at the toe box of this shoe, you have a synthetic overlay that wraps the entirety of the forefoot. You then have this padded mesh through the forefoot here going into the midfoot. Looking at the midfoot upper construction, you have this heavier leather overlay here with some mesh on the lateral side, and then over here on the medial side, it's a full leather-esque material. The boot itself is built with a stretchy neoprene-like material. And then looking at the midfoot, you have 5 core eyelets that go up with an additional lace loop here for security. Again, this is a bootie style shoe. You have 2 tabs here on the tongue and the heel. And then you also once again have some Stoic branding back here on the boot and then up here on the tongue loop. Looking at the outsole in this shoe, you have a full rubber outsole that goes around the shoe. It is wrapped up on the entirety of the shoe, so you have this nice 360 wrap. You also have a bias of a greater wrap here on the lateral forefoot to give you additional security. And this material is pretty thick in nature, so as you can see, it's a pretty thick rubber outsole. Looking at the tread of the shoe, it's a Stoic tread patterning, so they have used their emblem almost to replicate what this tread patterning is. This grip does a pretty good job on most surfaces. And then once again, this model does have a thin foam removable insole, but that pretty much wraps up the gist of the shoe's construction. If you have additional questions on this model, drop a comment down below. All right, guys, that wraps up my review of the Stoic Barefoot Trainer. Honestly, this has been one of the most surprising barefoot shoes for me in the sense of it performing well in the gym and then also looking really good. If you have additional questions on the Stoic Barefoot Trainer, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, if this review helped you out and you want to shop this shoe, it helps a ton if you go through the links below. I also have additional review content below. But all that said, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one.